Welcome to Leadership Forward, where you'll meet Arizonans with innovative answers to our state's greatest challenges. I'm Dawn Wallace from the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flynn Foundation. Earlier this year, the Helios Education Foundation, along with their partners, the Education Forward Arizona, produced a report making the economic case for increasing post-secondary attainment in our state. And it was predicated on the connection between college-educated individuals, workforce demands by business and industry, and also the correlation between advanced education and training and lifetime earnings and the social impact that individuals have. And so today we're going to be discussing how increasing our state's post-secondary enrollment rate will actually aid in creating more economic health for our state. In fact, the report cited a particular statistic that if we could increase our post-secondary rate by 20%, we could generate over $5 billion in economic impact, not only for the individual, but for our state's economy. And so joining me today to talk about this important topic, the report findings, and also, what we're doing in this state from a policy perspective is Dr. Paul Perrault. He is the Senior Vice President of Community Impact and Learning, also a Flynn Brown Fellow. We'll get to that later on, Paul. And Janice Palmer, Senior Vice President and Director of Policy for the Helios Education Foundation. So welcome, both of you, to Leadership Forward for a Better Arizona.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn.
All right. So Paul, I can call you Paul, right?
Please do.
Not Dr. Perrault. We're not formal here. But Janice, you still need to call him Dr. Perrault.
Fair.
So let's start with you, Paul. You were the project lead and one of the authors of the report, Billions to Gain the Economic Benefits of Investing in a More Educated Arizona. Let's start this conversation by sort of level setting. What do we mean when we say post-secondary attainment?
Yeah, great question, Dawn. So when we're talking about post-secondary education, we're really talking about trainings and opportunities that happen after high school. For some, that could be certifications or different ways to get a short-term training. For us, especially at Helios, a lot of times we're thinking about college, whether it's the community college level, a 2-year college, or thinking about a 4-year university. But that's really what we're focusing on when we're thinking about post-secondary education, the short-term certifications, or really for us thinking about that college-bound student.
So do you think that when we talk about post-secondary attainment, do you think the average person equates it beyond college to include, career programs, CTE, career and technical, any kind of credentialing? Does that become part of the conversation? Does that limit the conversation, I guess, if people don't really understand that post high school, there's so many different paths, and those paths all lead to some level of training that benefits our economy? Is that problematic in these policy conversations that people don't have the same definition?
Yeah, I think it is. And the interesting part about education is everybody has some experience with education, right? So when you look at previous generations, when you talked about attainment or post-secondary, it really was the college experience, 2 years, 4 years. And as we've evolved, I think workforce, skill-based items, certifications, those are very much part of the conversation now. And they happen all over. They can happen at the community college level. They can happen in the trades. They can happen in what Paul was talking about of short-term certificates. And so I do think there's been an evolution about what post-secondary attainment means. I think the business community and others have done a great job of talking about that, but they're all, what I think the important aspect is that high school is not enough. You're going to need something beyond high school in order to be successful. And whatever that looks like also depends a lot upon your life. You might not be able to be that traditional student to go into a 4-year university. You may have a child. You may have other responsibilities, an ill parent. And so there's these kind of midpoint items that you can do in order to still prepare yourself for the workforce and prepare yourself for a great economic future without having to have that straight line that so many of us are used to.
Well, and that's pretty that's pretty much a focus of the report, is that distinction between someone who has a bachelor's degree versus someone who just has a high school. And if I remember correctly, there's over your lifetime, it's about $1 million that you will earn in wages and all of the ancillary benefits if you have a bachelor's degree versus just a high school education. Paul, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you're dead on. If you only have a high school degree and that's where you kind of max out at, the average figure is around $600,000 for your lifetime if you're graduating in a cohort now. And if you go to college, a 4-year degree along the way is a $950,000, almost $1 million. So, I mean, as you think about that, if I was a senior, I didn't have people talk to me like that when I was a kid, but that would really have helped me make a decision. If somebody said, if you're going to graduate, if you're just going to go work now, you might only make $600,000 in your lifetime, but you can make almost 4 times that if you go to college and have this bachelor's degree. I think that would help a lot more students think about, this is the opportunity I need to be thinking about for the long-term goals in my life.
You are a data guy. And we like data because it's the foundation for all of the policy that we do. We talk about post-secondary attainment, but so much is happening in our high schools that helps lead us to being a better post-secondary educated society. Can you talk a little bit, and I realize that some of this data may be a little bit dismal, but what's happening in our high schools in terms of our students graduating, going on to college? Is there a problem there that's sort of inhibiting us? Are they not ready? Are the programs not available? Can they not afford it? College Knowing and Going, that's a fundamental program within Helios. What can you tell me about that, Paul?
Yeah, well, thinking about just from the you talked about the high school. So I'll start there, and then Janice, I know you can jump in on a couple of other things. One of the things, we're still getting out of the pandemic. So I think we can't forget about that. Even though we're a couple of years where we feel like we're out, we saw actually us take big leaps backwards in reading and mathematics. And that really is hindering students still. And how do we catch those students up that were having those problems in middle school, now in high school, now we're getting ready to go to college? So number one is just getting back to that. Number two is thinking about opportunities for students to go to college and know that they can go to college. So for a first generation student that maybe their parents or none of their family has gone to college, maybe they don't think that's right for them. And so thinking about different strategies like accelerated courses or, which include AP or IB or dual enrollment, they can really show a student that they can actually handle college coursework and they have pathways to get through. The big challenge right now is, again, less than half of the students, or right around half of the students that are graduating high school go to college in Arizona. So that is limiting opportunities for us right now. As a state, in the types of jobs that can come here, it's limiting their opportunities about, the types of jobs that they can get, or especially if jobs are automated or something else happens. And so that's kind of where we are around where students are coming out. Only about half the kids are going to college. A lot of students are unprepared. And so when they go to college, we have to be ready to have supports in place for them as well. Mm-hmm. Janice, you want to add to that?
Well, and I think, Paul, you make a really great point because, and Dawn, of asking the question of, by the time we get to post-secondary, or how well are students doing in college, we're kind of late to the game. I mean, it really starts in K-12 and even further back. And, like Paul shared about how, especially if you're a first generation student and college has not really been on your horizon, there's so many opportunities within the K-12 school system of dual enrollment, of advanced placement, where if you have those classes and you successfully achieve a passing grade there, now you don't have to wonder if college is for me or wonder if I'm college material. You did it. You're doing it in high school, you're doing it at a college level, and it's transformational about what can happen for students when we provide these college opportunities or this accelerated coursework in the K-12 setting. The challenge is, and I realized I've messed up, Dr. Perrault. When Dr. Perrault had done some great research also on dual enrollment. And the fact is that there's many students don't have the opportunity even to have those classes provided to them within their K-12 system. So not only do we have an issue about enrollment into post-secondary, we have an access issue within our K-12 schools about having opportunities for advanced placement, dual enrollment, international baccalaureate.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's dig into some of the strategies. The report identifies like 3 key focus areas. That would be pipeline programs like dual enrollment, accelerated coursework, more public-private partnerships to help our first-generation students, or those students for whom college isn't necessarily part of the culture of their family or community. Let's dig into AP and dual enrollment a little bit, because I think that parents particularly get confused about why AP, when should we do dual enrollment? When should we do AP? Should we do both? Should we do one? I mean, how do those 2 programs, how do they operate independently and then together as a pathway for students looking to go to college? Dr. Perrault.
Okay, so I'll start with, thinking about those courses, and just for people that are listening, number one, AP is in dual enrollment. We don't advocate for one over the other. In fact, most students that take those courses are taking a combination of both. I might have one dual enrollment course here. I might take 2 AP courses there. There's some advantages and disadvantages to each. And when you think about that, AP is a little bit easier. It has easier in that they have a standard curriculum across. If you take an AP course here, it's going to be the same AP course in Florida or the same AP course in Michigan. And to get college credit, you have to score high enough, usually a 3, 4, or 5 on that end of course exam to get college credit. Dual enrollment, it gives a little bit more flexibility to the teacher around the curriculum, and there isn't one standard test. And so if you pass the course with dual enrollment, typically then you are eligible for college course credit. So that's where there's some advantages, disadvantages for both, but really they both play hand in hand. And especially in Arizona, we do see challenges in rural areas or even in more high poverty school where maybe they can only offer this set of courses compared to this set of courses. So really, it's always good to have both those opportunities there so students can have some flexibility in choosing which of those courses work better for them.
And I'll just add on this. The other issue is how teachers are prepared is different for an advanced placement teacher versus a dual enrollment teacher. A dual enrollment teacher has to be certified by the community college accreditation. So there's certain coursework that has to be done. Like Paul mentioned about that the curriculum is the same for advanced placement, but there is a process that you have to go through with the college board in order to be certified to teach those courses. So it's not only an access issue and an opportunity for students, it's also making sure we have the teachers to teach this so that we even have that opportunity for students and parents to choose.
And of course, those classes still have to be aligned with our state standards, and they qualify or for high school graduation. In Arizona, do you find that our 3 public universities have embraced the accelerated courses or these college credit courses? I've heard stories of high school students coming in as juniors in our public universities. That's exciting to some because that means that's 3 years of college parents don't have to pay for. But are these young people really prepared for the rigor of actually collegiate level work in a collegiate experience with a faculty member that's maybe not used to teaching 18-year-olds?
Great question. I'll start off by most students don't come in as juniors. Like most students that take some of these courses, they're going to have like maybe 3 to 12 credit hours. And so they've had a taste of it. I think that there would be some people that would really advocate. Wouldn't that be great if you could knock out a lot of these and come in as a sophomore or a junior? But most students are going to be in that 3 to the 12 credit hour range. And so, that actually will smooth out over time. But again, it shows many of those students, especially those first generation students and that haven't had a chance, or family that have gone at the college that I can do college work. This shouldn't be something foreign to me that I can't do. And so that's where that's really beneficial to have that too. And I think what's been really great, and I'd love for Janice to talk a little bit more about that, is in Arizona, we haven't had, like, for example, statewide policies that have funded all students, because a lot of this is left up to families or districts and communities. And so, one of the things that, Helios and others have been really working at is really expanding those opportunities so that more students that are more lower income can have opportunities.
Janice, I know that this year, you worked on some extensive legislation around dual enrollment with a huge contingent of partners, specifically from the business community who has a real stake in this. Certainly its connection to the workforce and labor needs. Talk a little bit about how that coalition came together and what you all got accomplished this year in dual enrollment that is going to move the needle for a lot of sounds like our first generation, our kiddos.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it really came from the research. So I want to, I guess, emphasize how much the research and the data helps us make the case down at the Capitol. And it helped make the case, frankly, with the business community as well. When the business community saw that if you get an A, B, or C, then you're able then to move forward into college courses and be successful. We actually do have a partnership with the Decision Center for Educational Excellence talking about post-secondary. So we can actually see how students in a dual enrollment course in K-12 then do.
Wow, you can longitudinally track that student into college and predict their ability to successfly complete.
And then see the factual data about, did that happen?
That's amazing.
And so there was a little bit, to your point, there was more of a trust level that, okay, if state dollars are invested, are we going to get the return on investment that we need? And so there was $15 million allocated, and it was a partnership with, I can't say enough about the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, Maricopa Community Colleges. The governor had this in her initial budget. And then we had a fantastic sponsor with Senator Steve Kaiser. And so when you take a look at that, you have Republican, you have Democrat, and it was just a real bipartisan effort to say, okay, especially for low-income students, we did give preference to low-income students, that you would be able in grades 9 through 10 to take up to 6 credit hours, so 2 courses, and in grades 11 and 12, up to 12 credits, and then the state will pay $50 towards each credit hour. And so the issue that we found within the research, and again, with the research driving it, is that cost can be an issue, an access issue. If we can take that away, and if we can take away the barriers, because we know our kiddos are smart, if we can take those barriers away so that kids are able to access these courses, then what a great deal. And kind of what we talked about earlier about teachers as well, if there's not the courses offered, students can't take them. So we also provide resources in there for a one-time bonus for teachers to get their certification through the Teachers Academy, which is already free of charge if teachers enroll. So trying to put a package together, and I think that we had a really, really strong support behind that. It was one of the few initiatives that was funded in kind of a broader way.
And Paul, you talked a little bit earlier about some of the significant barriers that the non-academic barriers that first generation kids have. And I know this is a little bit off the dual enrollment, but I want to talk about, one of the focus areas was increasing opportunities for affordability, like the Arizona Promise Scholarship. But you all do fantastic work also with FAFSA. Is that something that both of you, or you, Paul, can maybe start with? Talk to us about what we're doing to remove the barriers to college going for first generation and low income students for whom their families see college as this sort of aspirational goal as opposed to their sort of natural pathway post high school.
Yeah, and I'll start with the FAFSA work because that's been a true partnership with lots of other groups within Arizona. For one, Helios partners with the Board of Regents really in a way to invest in a dashboard where counselors in each high school can see who's completing the FAFSA and who's not. And so they have on the fly data right in front of them. So when they actually have to talk to students, they can talk to the students that haven't actually completed their FAFSA, find out what their plans are, find out reasons why they haven't done it, instead of having just broad conversations with everyone. So targeted ways to talk to students with FAFSA.
Can you tell us why that's important? Like, what's that data metric that I love to use? And when we used to work together on this, I would say it to people and it would just blow their minds. Tell me that data statistic that correlates a FAFSA to actually college going.
Well, I mean, the correlation is almost as high as it can be. It can almost be a complete one. When Janice was talked about the decision center earlier, when we look at the data in there, we can see FAFSA completion rates by every high school in the state of Arizona. It's always within an 8 to 10% range. So if 70% of your students complete the FAFSA, between 60 and 70% go to college. And so that's why it's so important. That correlation is so strong that you always have a very close range of students that complete the FAFSA and that actually go to college. And so that's why it's always important to start out with a FAFSA. It's a very close, tight relationship that if you want more students to go to college, you need more students to complete the FAFSA because that's how they're going to get access to scholarships, grants, loans. And that's going to be that opportunity, number one, to get them in the door.
Yeah. And I can't help myself on this one because, Helios had college knowing and going. We had about 40 school districts that we were doing a FAFSA and whatnot. But it was really, Dawn, your leadership under Governor Ducey that elevated that to become a statewide opportunity. And so that it's really cool to see, right? Because the dashboard that started out as kind of a more pilot in a foundation to the governor's office as, a leadership priority of the governor's office to now being housed within the Arizona Board of Regents as just a basic item that is provided to students is really extraordinary. And I think it's how state policy should be done. And it also shows when something works, you get the buy-in.
Yeah. And, part of it is you get the buy-in of the school counselors as well. And sort of peripheral to this, the state's been making significant investments in increasing the number of school counselors, career counselors, and folks who really do work with students to not only get them registered for these courses, but also work with them on the sort of idea behind college is really a realistic goal for you, as opposed to what maybe your culture or your community might think. So it's very exciting. And I do want to step back and say that while we're talking about post-secondary attainment right now, this has been 8 years in the making. So Janice, do you want to talk a little bit about in 2015 with the Chief 60, and maybe we can touch a little bit on the progress meter goal and where we started, where we are.
Yeah, I think, back, 2015, it's amazing how time flies. There was actually a nationwide effort in order to say that we need to start putting a stake in the ground for our states, our country, in order to be economically prosperous into the future. And also the morally right thing so that people have a job and have a great, successful life. And for Arizona, what that was a Chief 60, that we'd have 60% of our 25 to 64-year-olds, that's usually what we consider the working age, of our population would have either a 2-4-year degree or a certification. And so that has been our North Star. And we continue to work on that. All of these items that we've been talking about today are all in support of trying to get us to that level. And like you've said, I mean, when you think a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, these are long runways that we have to continue to keep pushing towards. And we've made gains. Unfortunately, like Paul mentioned, COVID really set us back. We did not backslide as much as some other states, but we definitely started losing our momentum and the gains.
I just wanted to build on what Janice said too, and kind of we talked about the individual earlier too, about how much they make from high school to having a bachelor's degree. Why is this important to everyone else in the community? Is because you also have these societal gains and fiscal gains for the state. If people are better educated and they have better paying jobs, that's going to mean better paying jobs here where people are buying things, buying property, paying taxes, and it keeps taxes low. It makes neighborhoods better. It makes health better when people have money to buy food in that too. And so we have to also think about why are we pushing for Achieve 60? Why are we hoping to get there? It's really for not just the betterment of the individual. Obviously, it starts with all of that, but it's really for the betterment of the community and the state of Arizona as a whole.
Well, and there's a social science statistic around it too, is that you're more likely to go to college if your parents went to college. So it creates a generational benefit, and I think that's a real impact of this work is creating that generational wealth and impact. I'd be remiss if we ended without talking about what I think is sort of the foundation of all of these sort of college knowing and going is the early education has to play a role in this. Like, you don't get to ninth grade and then we start at birth, and everything that develops. You guys remember the statistic that the most amount of brain development happens between 0 to 3. So obviously we don't want to wait till we're 14. Paul and Janice, both of you, since you've been both doing this work, don't all roads lead back to literacy? And okay, so tell me about that and some of your work around that. Dr. Paul, tell us, you start. You're being shy. Yeah. I know you want to talk.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you at Helios, but even on the progress meter, I mean, we think of third grade literacy as the cornerstone, the first metric that we really are always holding tight to and true to. That's the point in a student's life where they're shifting from learning to read to reading to learn. And what we see is, thinking about the data, what happens after that is if you fall off and you're not proficient, it gets harder and harder each year after that. And that circles back to, other issues that are in play, chronic absenteeism.
Right.
If kids aren't doing well in school, then they become disengaged. And if they're not coming to school, then they're going to struggle in reading. And so we have this circle, especially in all those early grades, that if you get off track, it's going to be just harder for you down the road. And that limits your options of going to college or dropping out. And so, we really see that as such an important measure. Kindergarten, obviously, and preschool, very important measures too. But, by that time you get to that third grade literacy, we really want to see you reading at proficiency level.
Absolutely. And third grade reading is the first time we really get to have some kind of apples to apples comparison about students. But it's really, like you talked about, the brain development is so much earlier than that. Paul's talking about preschool, kindergarten. We have a great group, Read On Arizona, where Terry Clark's our statewide literacy director. And she always reminds us every morning she's waking up thinking about this. And we passed an amazing package after that pretty much copied what Mississippi did, because Mississippi went from bottom of the barrel to having the highest gains in reading in the country. And really what it's about is we can't wait till third grade, right? We have to look at how are you doing in kindergarten. And sometimes people get a little freaked out, like we're assessing kindergartners, but it's not a multiple choice test. It's not a bubble sheet.
It's not the SATs
it's
for
not the
kindergartners.
SATs. We're going to give kids a break a little bit. We're making sure you have your motor skills, your social skills, making sure you have your words, these basic building blocks that you need in order to be successful in first grade and second grade and third grade. And this one gets me really riled up because, we know if kids do not have the skills necessary, what their trajectory in life is. So we should be doing everything possible as soon as possible, not only as a moral call to do the right thing by students, but we know what that looks like into the future. And so really third grade is too far along. It needs to be kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And it's amazing when students have those basic foundational skills, those building blocks become much easier to be in accelerated coursework and then move on to your post-secondary degree.
Our friend, the state literacy director, Terry Clark, will tell you that you need to be reading to your kids in the womb. So that is a great way for us to segue. I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to conclude. Paul, you are a Flynn Brown Fellow, and Janice, you are one of our Academy facilitators for our Education Day.
And I'm a friend of Flynn Brown Fellows.
Yeah. And you're a good friend of Flynn Brown Fellows. Can you each talk very, very briefly about how, Paul, your experience as a fellow, how that's helped you, and then Janice, your perspective watching fellows go through that sort of initial aha moments about policy issues that maybe they didn't know much about, and how you've seen their opinion sort of evolve into, it being much more of a complex issue than what maybe they see on a headline in a newspaper article or on a tweet or something like that. Paul, let's start with you.
For me, and especially the Flynn Brown experience, the work that we do at Helios is education related every day. And so you almost get caught in that trap of, well, education is the only thing and the most important thing in Arizona, period. And you forget about issues like water. You forget about DES. You forget about, budgets and all of those other things and other people that are looking for resources too to make this a better community. So I think in that experience, what's always helped me in Flynn Brown is thinking about part of the whole picture and where education fits into that and how it can make some of those other things better. We hope that if we have better educated people, that there's less people in poverty, that there's less people going through the DES system, that, fewer foster students. And so I try to think about how education relates to all those things. And that's where Flynn has always been a great tool in a resource is it's not just education for education purposes. It's how we make Arizona a better state.
Janice,
yeah,
you want to bring us home?
Yeah, well, just, facilitate. I think first of all, I think you do a fantastic job of getting quality leaders in the state. And then also the programming that really takes a look at different perspectives, because I think that's what has been the most fascinating to watch is that folks have a perspective. And then when you hear differing points of view, the discussion behind it and folks feeling like, okay, I didn't think about it this way, or I really have a strong visceral reaction to that response that is very much every day at the Capitol. And so I think talking through those, having a better understanding of things that people think are a given that are not necessarily a given in a political environment. And those aha moments are great. And I think, they followed up. I think that there's fellows that have followed up saying, oh my gosh, I just never thought about this. Help me, work through how I can be most successful. So I think it's great.
Yeah, or they hear somebody who they may think that they're ideologically, opposed to in every possible way. And then they may hear some nugget that they go, oh, you know what? That makes sense. So, that's really the tenet of our program.
The only other thing I might add to that is the common ground. Working in Flynn, you had people across the political spectrum. As a society, we will not make it if we stay in these polarized ends. And I always think it's good to have people in the room thinking about common solutions that are across that spectrum and actually having to give and take a little bit. And we need to get back to relationships like that instead of just being so far to the right or the left.
Great relationships. Seeing people as people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Paul and Janice for an amazing conversation on a topic that you both know I'm very passionate about and I miss a lot. If you want to read and find out more about our post-secondary attainment strategies in Arizona, specifically dual enrollment, please go to the helios.org website. You will see 2 reports, one called Billions to Gain and one called Dual Enrollment in Arizona High School, and has a lot of good data in there. Thank you again. Thank you for being on Leadership Forward and making Arizona a better place to be.
Thanks,
you. Don.
That wraps up this episode of Leadership Forward. You can find out more about the work of the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at our website, azcivicleadership.org.